Welcome to American Gypsy Podcast. I'm your host, Gypsy, and today we have a special guest, Angela Fields. She is entrepreneur and founder of CurlyCoilyTresses. Welcome to the show, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very appreciative being here.
Glad to have you here. Before we get started on your products, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in this business?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So after graduating college, I was worked 26 years in corporate America in the utility industry, ironically. But what was happening for me in those last few years that I was there, I was starting to having a series of allergies that were getting progressively worse, including allergies to fragrance. And I had decided to transition away from the chemical relaxers and just to wear my natural texture. And I noticed that my texture was much drier, even drier than from wearing chemical relaxers. So I started trying to shop and find products that I felt would work for me, and was having a lot of difficulty doing that. 96 to 98% of all US hair care is fragranced. I tapped into that remaining amount, couldn't find what I needed, what worked for me, shopped in other countries, found better options, wasn't completely satisfied. But at this point in time, from a childhood history of starting to learn how to take care of my own hair, and that's something we'll talk about later after having lost my hair twice to chemical relaxers. Back then, I knew which ingredients I needed in my hair care products and which I needed to avoid. And so I just started buying raw ingredients and was making products right in my kitchen and was quite content doing that. So I buy the ingredients, formulate, reformulate, and then I hit upon something that worked extraordinarily well. And so for the last year in corporate America, I was just doing that, just making products for myself in my kitchen. And then after losing my job, I spent some time trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, because I felt I wanted to exit the utility industry entirely and maybe even corporate America. I just hadn't decided. But a few weeks into unemployment, if you will, I decided to launch the brand. I had the formulas in my kitchen, had been using them for the past year on my own hair. And it started out trying to solve my own problem of allergies and dry hair. And then it transitioned into something much, much more.
So were you always wearing relaxers before this experience?
For many years, I was. My initial relaxer was when I was in elementary school and lost my hair to that, came back out, and then maybe around junior high again, and then having stopped again, and then again in college and in many years after college, after in corporate America. I had worn chemical relaxers, but I started transitioning away from them in 2013 and ultimately did the big chop to just cut off all of the remaining relaxer in early of 2014, actually.
And you said you had a traumatic accident with a relaxer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. So when I initially had my hair relaxed, it was by a kitchen beautician, if you will. Someone that just kind of was doing her own daughter's hair and told my mother she could do mine. Um, so I didn't really understand what relaxers were at that point in time. But what I heard my mother say is, we won't have to use the straightening comb anymore. And so for those ladies that are maybe my age, maybe even younger, they know what that pressing comb is. And it was like, okay, this sounds pretty good, because I'm very tender-headed and had thick hair, a lot of hair. And so anything that said no pressing comb, I was right there ready to jump in and try. And so I lost my hair to that. And then many years later, lost my hair again. And this time it was actually a cosmetologist that had relaxed my hair. So after that, I started learning all about hair and how to take care of hair, what hair needs, what hair doesn't need. And at that time, that was before we had the internet. So it was a lot of times in the library, reading books, reading journals, trying to find some articles. But I wanted to know everything about hair. So if the person styling my hair wasn't already doing those things, I wanted to be telling her, well, we really need to do this next because we haven't done that yet, that sort of thing. So yeah, it started very young. And when I started researching hair, there was there was no conception, there was no thought, no forethought about
Mm.
having a hair care brand many years later. Again, I was trying to take care of myself, trying to solve my own problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And what did you discover in your research? Like, how has your hair care changed since that accident? And how do you take care of your hair now? What changed?
Okay. So what changed since then is understanding your hair needs moisture, your hair needs hydration, your hair needs protection from heat. There are certain products that are better able to do these things than others. Not everything is equal. Understanding what makes up moisture, and so when you're looking at a product label, and I spend a lot of time reading labels, and I always encourage anyone that you read labels and understand what's going into your hair. So if something is going to be considered a moisturizer, you need to have water or aloe vera or humectant in among the first three ingredients in a product label. So if we just look at this particular label here, so I'm not sure if you're going to be doing any video, but I'll
Yep,
talk
this
through
is
it.
a video.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So looking at this label here, you're going to see water is the first ingredient. Purified water is the first ingredient in this product. And so for a product to be considered a moisturizer, it needs to have water, aloe vera, or at least a humectant amongst those ingredients in the beginning of the label, because the significance of an ingredient label is it's in descending order based on concentration in this product. So if someone said something was a moisturizer and it's the very last ingredient, that tells you there is very, very little water in this container, and hence it would not be a moisturizer. So understanding those basic elements, and then also learning about what do different ingredients do, how do they serve a purpose on the label. Is something a humectant, so it's going to draw moisture in? Is something an emulsifier, if you will? And so that's keeping the various elements of a product mixed together very well. So as we know, water and oil generally does not mix, but if you're using an appropriate emulsifier, it's going to keep those ingredients together looking like a nice, a nice product, when you're looking at it inside the container. So there's not any separation of the products. So these were many of the types of things that I spent time learning about, and the value of those ingredients. And then also, when we think about the various phases of life that we all go through, hormones is a huge factor in our lives. And it could be when we're starting, our menstrual cycle. It could be pregnancy, post-pregnancy. It could be menopause. There are many times where our hormones are peaking and then valleying, if you will. And that affects our hair immensely. And so understanding what those changes are and knowing how you can use your knowledge to work against those or to make up for those. So an example of something like that is something as basic as sebum. It is something that our body produces normally in our skin, on our scalp. And then the sebum by gravity, if your hair is relaxed, if your hair is generally straight, that sebum by gravity is going to slide all the way down the hair shaft to the end. But when you're naturally textured and you have these curls and coils in your hair, or you have dreadlocks in your hair, it's a bit harder for that sebum to come down the hair shaft. And so if you will, using the right types of products to almost do the same thing that sebum does is an ideal way to go. So you learn that not all products are equal. Certain things work better than others. And if we can keep some closeness to what normally bodily functions are, that will help us as well. So sebum is normally produced. Sodium lactate is something else that our body produces. Those things are produced in less quantities as we age. So if you're using some products that can replicate what sebum does, what sodium lactate does, that helps you stay in the more natural theme, for those types of things that matter. And so my knowledge initially began on what do these types of products do? And then let's break down the ingredients. And so you can find that there are certain ingredients that are exceedingly harsh. So if you had alcohol, like an SD alcohol, or isopropyl alcohol. So that's like when you go to Target or Walmart and you're buying that container of alcohol because you use it for different things. If you're using that on your hair, that's going to be exceedingly drying on your hair. And there are many products that does have alcohol in it because it helps the product to do the stated purpose of it, if you will, but then it can also inadvertently dry your hair out. So those were the types of things that I wanted to know, that I wanted to understand, and then factor that into the products that I have available on the market to keep them as natural as they could be, but then as effective as they could be, and then trying to mimic bodily processes. For me, for my products, is what I really was trying to do. I didn't want it to be a
Mm.
highly chemical type product, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes,
Yeah.
that has been the journey that has brought me here.
And I really appreciate the research and the effort that you put in because people like me, I do read the ingredients. I'm one of those that has several apps and kind of do a lot of research on to keep chemicals out of my body, hair, and all of that.
Absolutely, yes.
And I know different hair types require different types of care. Is your product for all hair types? And what have you figured out in your research and tips on how to take care of different types of hair?
Okay. Well, one key aspect is I will mention very few of us actually have one exact hair texture across the entirety of our scalp.
Mm.
And so the products that I have, they do generally work very well for all textures. Now, this particular product, my Nourish treatment, this was named by Oprah Daily top 19 for 4C hair textures because of the types of ingredients in the product and because of how moisturizing and hydrating the product is. But still, in general, the products can be used by all hair types. And so, and what I mean by that, for me, I have a looser curl texture across the front. So that's more in the range of like a 3C type in the front. It detangles a bit easier. The curl diameter is just a bit larger than what it is. Now in my crown, I have more of a 4C type texture. So it has less of a defined curl. It is the density is greater. It does tangle a bit more easily. So I wind up when I'm detangling in this section, I'm going to work in smaller sections and use a bit more product to make sure that I'm getting that slip to be able to detangle easily. And then in my back, I have a tighter curl texture there as well. And it also has more elasticity. So it's going to shrink. So like if I'm doing a wash and go, if I sought to air dry, it's going to shrink more in the back and almost look like it was cut that way. But that's just the differences in texture that I have on my head of hair. And so as I was thinking through, well, what types of products or ingredients do I want to use or have available because of this difference? And that's why there's a mix of oils and butters in the products that work well for a range of textures. And then moisture and hydration is always good. Conditioning agents, softening agents are always good for any hair texture. And so unless your hair is exceptionally fine and thin, the products would work very well for you. They could be a bit heavy if you had very thin and very fine hair. Some of my customers that have a coarser texture, so that means that each strand is a bit heavier, they may use Nourish treatment as a leave-in conditioner. Whereas when I use it on my hair, it's a bit heavy because I have a finer strand, but I still have a lot of density. So something like this would be too heavy for me. And so Enrich is really what was developed to be the leave-in conditioner. But if you will, uh, and it works very well, whether you have coarse or finer textures, but some of my customers with coarser textures just prefer Nourish. And I like to be able to use products the way that my customers may use them. They may not be using them the way it was intended when developed, but using them the way that they use so I can share that information. So when I had some tell me, oh no, I like the Nourish treatment as to be my leave-in, it works very well on my hair. It's like, okay, I'll try it. And it was just far too heavy for me. So Enrich is still what I highly recommend, but if someone has a coarser texture, I'll tell them, Nourish may work very well for you too. So the products were designed with a variety of textures in mind. I did not want someone to think if they were like me with the one texture here, something very different here, and then something different in the back. I didn't want them to feel like they needed 3 different sets of products for those different areas of their hair. And so that's why I explained it in the way that I do. In this section where I have more of a 4C texture that tangles a bit easier, the shedding is a bit more in this section. I work in smaller sections and use a bit more product. Across here, not even an issue. And in the back, generally not, but if my hair was in a wash and go and I had a lot of shrinkage in the back, then I will maybe break that up into some smaller sections for detangling as well. So I think that anyone trying the products are going to see that they do work very well for them, even if they have a mixed range of textures. The exception, somebody with exceptionally fine or thin hair. And I do have, men that use the products. I also have customers that maybe have, their race is mixed between maybe white and black. And so they have some type of a unique curl texture. It works very well with textures of that nature as well. The one thing would be dreads. I would recommend the oil to be used as a nice hydrator or scalp treatment, hot oil treatment, or leaving it on the dreads themselves. But the other 2 products, you may get some flaking as far as coming from the hair if you used it as a leave-in. Now, if you maybe put the product in, rinse somewhat coming out, then it may be okay. So that is one caution that I do give, certainly, with someone who may be styling their hair like that. But yes, a range of textures the products work very well for.
Yeah, that's interesting because I did a series of tests to figure out like what's my hair type and how do I take care of my I'm usually in my natural hair, curly hair. So I did a lot of research to figure out what my hair type is so I can properly take care of it. And now that you mentioned like you can have different hair types in different parts of your hair, that makes total sense because I feel like it's one thing on the front side and then the middle, it feels like it's a complete different hair texture.
It's like somebody else stepped into the room, almost
Right.
when you're trying to
It's
take
like,
care of
okay, I need moisture clearly.
it.
What's a common misconception people have about curly hair or natural hair in general?
That curly hair can be extraordinarily strong because of the way you can feel the definition in the curl, the way you can touch it, that it should be extraordinarily strong just from the way that it looks, and actually it's extraordinarily fragile. So if you will, when you're thinking about your follicle, so the follicle is the root of your hair. So it's below your scalp, and that is where the hair grows, and then it pushes through the scalp. So different shaped follicles produce different types of hair. And so if you will, when we wonder, well, why is my hair curlier than this next person? And it could be a sister, it could be mother-daughter. It all comes back to that, what type of follicle did we inherit from our parents that affects the curl of the hair. And so curly hair is very fragile. It does need to be taken care of in a certain way. I think something else that can be confusing or can be a sense of giving some person a level of comfort is that, co-washing has been huge in the community. And because they're feeling like they're skipping that shampoo, that the shampoo is actually causing the drying of the hair. And so they're going to jump right into co-washing. I did it for a few months because I heard people talking wonderful things about it. And basically what I found out for the first 6 weeks, okay, it looked fine. Everything was just going great. But when I got to probably at just before 3 months, right at 3 months, something was happening. My hair was behaving in a different way. It was dull. It was breaking off. It was shedding differently. It had no moisture to it. It almost seemed like no life. And so what I learned from that experience is step back. Shampooing is the first step to moisturizing your hair. And the reason why I say that is shampoo's purpose is to remove sebum, to remove dirt, to remove product residue from your scalp and from your hair. What it also does is because of the pH, if you will, in the shampoo, it also lifts the cuticles on your hair strand. And so your hair has 3 different layers to it. So it's the outer, there's a middle layer, and then there's a core layer. And for you to truly moisturize your hair, to truly hydrate your hair, is you need to lift that cuticle to allow the product to penetrate into the hair. And so if you're not really removing old product, dirt, sebum, all these types of things from your hair, you're not getting a chance for that to happen. And so that moisture cannot penetrate. And that moisture penetrating is the way to truly moisturize your hair, letting that moisture get into your hair, the product, the nutrients, the nourishment, letting all that get into your hair is the best way to moisturize your hair. And doing a co-wash because you think you're skipping that step of shampoo is going to get you closer to moisturization. And initially it will. It's going to look very good at first. But after this goes a while, when your hair has not been able to nourish itself, that is when you'll start wondering, oh, what happened? Do I need to change products again? It seemed to be working and now it's not. And so that I think is very important for you to understand as well as to why. So shampooing is the first step to moisturizing. Now it's completely different if you want to use a conditioner to because you don't have the time to do a wash day. You don't have time to shampoo your hair and go through your various steps. Or maybe you just want to do a quick style change. So you just want to wet it a little bit, add some conditioner to it so that you can just do a quick style change and go from this style to a different style. But just as life gets in the way and we have moments where we just don't have time to do all the things we would love to do, so we're trying to shortchange it. So I'm all for that short term, wanting to do a co-wash, but over the longer term, shampooing is really the first step to moisturizing. And I think something else that may surprise individuals is that detangling is how you manage shedding. So we shed 50 to 100 hairs a day. And I know that can sound like this huge number, but in general, we shed 50 to 100 hairs a day. When we had relaxed hair, gravity just brought the hair all the way out. But with curly hair, those shed hairs get tangled into the rest of your hair, and that's what creates knots. That's what creates these inconsistencies in what we're able to do with our hair. And so detangling is the way to manage shedding because you're pulling those already detached hairs. They've detached from the scalp already. They're just stuck in the curls on your head. And detangling is how you manage the shedding process. And I always encourage customers to take a picture of their hair to accumulate all their shed hair from when they wash their hair and take a quick picture of it with their phone. And the reason for this is you compare these pictures over time. You can get a sense of is shedding increasing, decreasing, or is it staying the same? So it can give you an indication that something may not be working for you because you're seeing this increasing amount of shed hair. But in general, that is something that's key to keep in mind. We shed 50 to 100 hairs a day, but we grow about a ½ inch a month. And so at the end of a given year, that is really 6 inches of hair. So if you're not seeing that amount of growth happening, then this means that the breakage you're experiencing is about equal to your growth. And there's something that you need to be doing differently to make sure that you're seeing and observing that amount of growth.
Yeah, I know people are very much into the conditioner, but for me personally, I try not to use the conditioner as much. I feel like every time I use it, I lose volume and strength. Like my
Okay,
curls look better afterwards, but I don't have as much volume and my hair is already soft and it gets softer. And I'm
softer.
like, I don't, I want to give it moisture, but at the same time, I don't know what to do about it being like weak and um, not as much volume. So I kind of stay away from conditioner. I don't know if there's anything I can do to kind of like moisturize, but still give it strength. I don't know if it's deep conditioning or anything like that. I was just,
Absolutely. You can still moisturize and give your hair strength. Something, a product like the Enrich can do it for you. What you can also do is after you have conditioned, so you've smoothed it through your hair, you've done all the detangling that's necessary, you can do a partial rinse. And so a partial rinse is just using the water to get the product off the root of your hair. And so you're focusing in on that moisturizer being from maybe the mid shafts down to the ends, because that's the oldest part of your hair. It is the most delicate part of your hair. And so that's the part that needs some TLC, if you will. But yes, you can just certainly do a partial rinse and remove the product from the roots of your hair, and that will help to give you volume as well. And now something else, how do you dry your hair? Do you use a diffuser, blow dryer? Do you air dry?
I air dry.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried using like one of those diffusers to kind of see if I can get more volume, but it just kind of frizzes out my hair. So I just air dry.
Okay.
I
Um,
do with a towel, I kind of like scrunch it up just a little bit. But other than that, just let it air dry.
okay. So you just stepped into something else there. What I was going to suggest, depending on how you dried your hair, is to do it from the flip side. So like if I was going to wear my hair parted here, I
Hmm.
would actually dry it with the part over here. And so that way there's going to be a natural level of fullness when I lay the hair back to the other side, because it dried over here. And then I'm going to get that lift and that fullness at the root.
Okay.
Um, and if you're experiencing drier hair, you don't want to towel dry your hair. Generally, products on our hair work better on soaking wet hair. We
Mm.
get the best level of moisture on soaking wet hair. That is really the best step there. And you're going to get the best results on products on soaking wet hair. And so if you're thinking you shampoo in the shower when you come out, if you didn't use that towel, you're thinking about all the water just going to be dripping all over your body when you're coming out, which is more than likely part of the reason why you may be using that towel to kind of scrunch it. But
Mhm.
if you put your leave-in product like Enrich on your soaking wet hair while you're still in the shower, you're not going to have all of that dripping coming across your body after you get out the shower. And the most important part, that because the water is absorbing into your hair. See, your towel doesn't need that extra water for moisture. You know, your body doesn't need it. Your bath, certainly your bathroom floor doesn't need it, but your hair generally needs it, but it needs something to help push the moisture into your hair. So let's say, so you use the shampoo, you've rinsed it well. Because of the pH of shampoo, your cuticles are gently lifted. So that is the ideal time to moisturize your hair. And so you get a product like Enrich onto your soaking wet hair. It's going to push that moisture into your strand. And the pH of Enrich is also going to start gently closing the cuticle and keeping that moisture inside your hair. So the long lasting moisture happens from water, from moisture and water being able to penetrate into your hair, as opposed to just hanging out on the surface. So that's where you get that massive change. So that's one of the things that that's two things that I would suggest. So that partial rinse to remove the product from the roots of your hair so that you're getting that lift that you want. And then also I have done some tests myself. If I air dry, how does my hair come out versus if I use a diffuser? And what I do like about the diffuser is that I can keep this back part stretched. I mentioned earlier to you how I have a lot of elasticity back here. It shrinks up. So what I can do is just hold my hair out and use the diffuser on it. And so that helps me to lock in that stretch style, if you will. And so when I'm doing my diffuser across the front, I generally hang upside down and let my hair hang out, and then I'm diffusing that way. So again, I get more lift as well. And then something else, if you're interested in doing a more defined style, sometimes I'll use like flexi rods or perm rods to help with the styling. And once the hair is completely dry, I usually sit under a bonnet dryer when I've done the flexi rods or perm rods. But when I unfurl them and I'm separating the hair, you get a whole lot more lift because of that definition that was created from using the flexi rods or perm rods. So I don't do that every time I'm washing my hair. I tend to try mix things up, just do some different styles just to see. But in essence, that's how I get the greatest lift, by diffusing, by hanging upside down, or diffusing it with my hair parted over here, but knowing when it's dry, I'm going to flip it back and then I'm going to have that lift. And so those are some of the best ways. And then rinsing from doing a partial rinse to remove the product from the roots of your hair will also help with lift.
How often do you recommend someone shampoos their hair?
Every 5 to 9 days, I think, is a good target range. Understand there are hormones that build up on the scalp. It's a normal part of life. There's not a lot you can do to control your hormones, but the exception would be like cortisol. That's a stress hormone. So managing stress better in your life, you can do something about that. But there are other types of hormones. I'm 57 now, and so DHT, and then just testosterone and all the various hormones that are flowing in your body. So even though we're women, we do have testosterone hormones in our body. It's just the quantities that we have. Men would have a lot more than what women would have. But when you're seeing thinning in this crown area, generally it's that testosterone hormone. But staying on a schedule of shampooing your hair once every 5 to 9 days is help managing that process. It's removing any of the oil, the perspiration, the products, the sebum, plus the added hormones on our scalp. It's freeing our scalp of those. So that's generally how much I recommend someone shampoo. And I also understand, again, life gets in the way. We have other responsibilities, and so we may get off schedule. But if we just try and shoot for every 5 to 9 days, and then if something happens, we just want that to be the exception and not the rule, that we're letting it go for that long. Generally, you'll see your shedding increases the longer we go between shampoos. So if you will, you're going to find a lot more hair in that comb, when you get to the end of your shampoo day, if it's been 2 weeks or 3 weeks in between your shampoos. So it does affect the amount of hair you're able to keep on your head and keep in that growth cycle by doing the things that we need to do to take care of our hair.
Since we're on the topic of hormones, which is something that I've done a lot of research on, I read in your bio you help people over 50 take care of their hair after like menopause happens. What changes happen to your hair after menopause?
Oh, absolutely. With menopause, there are several things that can take place that can affect your hair, just like there are things regarding menopause. It could be the night sweats, the hot flashes, difficulty sleeping, brain fog. It can be a litany of things, and not every person will experience everything, but the range of things that can affect us as we're going through menopause, it could be hair loss to the point that you can look down and see your scalp through your hair. It can be hair loss at the crown, at the edges here. So not even just in the crown, it could also be in the edges. So hair loss, it could be hormonal hair loss. It could be hair loss from different types of alopecia that can also be affecting us. Our hair tends to stay in the growth phase for less amount of time when we're going through menopause and those years after. So whereas when you're younger, the amount of time your hair stays in the growth phase, the active phase of hair gaining length, is longer when you're younger, not so long as you get older. So you'll have less growth, you'll have more shedding. There could be hair loss that's involved. Your curls, your texture of your hair can actually change. So that's going back to follicles. The shape of the follicle determines whether you have a tighter curl, a looser curl, a wave, or something that's straight. And so maybe you used to have a tighter curl, but now you're noticing in certain areas your curl diameter has actually changed. Or you have gone from straight hair to now having some type of curly hair or wavy hair. So, literally, hormones can also do that, affect the type of hair that's on our head. Also, hormonal changes can also affect make our hair very wiry. Oftentimes, you may hear women saying that the gray hair they have is very coarse and very wiry and just doesn't respond the same way. But it could also be hair that is the natural hair color that is coarser. And so, what is happening there, the hair is almost just like disintegrating. And so, some extra measures there are helpful. So the different types of things that can affect us during menopause and those years behind is the amount of growth, the shape of our curl, the texture of our hair, the amount of shedding we're experiencing, the amount of hair loss that we're experiencing. And there are things that we can indeed do to mitigate that. And so the Ageless Tresses course that I offer is talking about all of those things. This is what menopause looks like in your hair so that we can become aware, because we may not even be aware of all the things that menopause can bring about in our hair. But the course seeks to educate you on what menopause can do to your hair. And then this is what you can do to counter it. And then this is what you can do if you're having more extensive type of hair loss or you're getting into the realm of alopecia, as I crossed into. So initially I was having thinning. So that's also a big challenge with menopause. And so the thinning was happening right along my part line where I generally will part my hair. And it presented itself by saying the part was actually getting wider. And it's like the part was not always that wide. And it could be something as simple as vitamin D, which is what it was in my case several years back. It was a deficiency in vitamin D, and then having to add a supplement into my routine to address that. I was able to work through with the vitamin D, using the organic pumpkin seed oil directly on the scalp to work through that. But then in late 2022, I was diagnosed with CCCA, which is a type of alopecia. And alopecias there are several different types of alopecia, but they can all be divided into scarring or non-scarring type alopecia. And once you go through hair loss, whether it's here, whether it's random spots in the back, wherever you're experiencing it, because different types of alopecia cause different types of hair loss, and the locations of where it is on your scalp could differ. But there are certain treatments for that as well. So identifying that it's happening and then getting the help that you need is your best line of defense there as well. When my dermatologist said, okay, this is CCCA, I knew what it was because I had already done a lot of research on alopecia. It was just, I still had to sit back in the chair, and it just kind of hits hard. But there you have options as well. If it's the thinning, the alopecia, so again, talking through. So these are things that we tend to see in our hair as we're going through the perimenopause, menopause, and then beyond. So one of the numbers that I share is that up to 66% of women that are 45 plus are going to experience some type of hair loss. It just becomes, how serious is it? Is it really thinning? Or is it complete hair loss? Is it visible scalp that you can see? But the barometer of whether or not you can regrow hair is two things. You have to know if your follicle, which is the root of your hair, if your follicle is healthy and capable of regrowing hair. And then the second thing is, if you have a scarring type of alopecia like I did, scar tissue can block the follicle and not even allow hair to come through. And so you may be thinking you're not regrowing hair when in fact the scar tissue is blocking the hair in the follicle. So what I did with my dermatologist is first we did injections into the scalp. It was of a steroid to break up the scar tissue, and you do it right in the area of where the hair is missing. And so it's once a month for 6 months, and then you wait for 3 months. Then you go back in and they look at your scalp again to see if hair is pushing through the surface. And that is ideal because that meant that my follicles are capable of regrowing hair. Hair just couldn't get through because of the scarring from the alopecia. And so my hair is actually filling in. And so I share, my own story when I'm talking through with the course. And I talk to the ladies, what are you experiencing? And so it can be common among to have the hair loss among the edges. But what's key, if the follicles are healthy, you can regrow the hair. Then the issue becomes, is there some scarring there that's blocking it? And if there is, now we need to break up that scar tissue. But if there is no scar tissue, then certainly taking a look at your diet, making sure you're getting the right nutrients. Nutrafol for me has been huge. So I started on Nutrafol, the version for women 45 plus, as soon as I realized that I had alopecia and I needed to work through that. And it's also, there are some DIY treatments that you can do. Like I love Ayurvedic type products. So Amla fenugreek is something that I use on my hair, making a mask. And so that's a recipe that I do share, as far as the course is concerned. So yes, I want women to know that what menopause looks like in our hair, and then to have a new regimen, if you will, a personalized hair routine that they can use to regrow their hair.
What is your future plans for, I guess, for this, the product? Where do you sell it now, and what do you see for the future of the company?
Wow. So right now, most of my products are sold through my website, CurlyCoilyTresses.com. And if you don't already have my contact information, I can certainly get that to you, but I think you may have received it.
Yep, I'll
Okay.
have all your information in the description as well.
Okay, perfect. So primarily from CurlyCoilyTresses.com. I am on Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok. And so there is content in all of those places. I also have a private Facebook group, that I can help ladies there as well, joining the group. Then the course, Ageless Tresses, navigating hair health through menopause and beyond, also is a very good option. In fact, I had a course last night. Had a new group of ladies coming in and joining me last night to get some help, for their challenges. And so the course is available as well. At this point in time, I'm usually doing the course once a month. And then when I have some special events going on, then I'll add in an additional course mid-month as well. So definitely, absolutely.
Well, Angela, thank you so much for all this information about hair. It's been very insightful.
Oh, you're welcome. I will say to you, and it has been my pleasure meeting you. And thank you for the invite to meet with you. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise. And for the listeners, I'll have Angela's information in the description as well as ours. If you want to be a guest, email americangypsy@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Angela, for being on the show.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the invite. It's been a pleasure.
All right, peace.